Okay, we're holding now today the Aleph Amid Aleph. We're holding now Siman Kidushin Daf. Now Kiddush, this refers to different Amiroim. Kiddush is like we're going to learn in a second. Is Amar Le'Rab Acha B'Rei Derava Le'Rab Ashi. See it? Chof Aleph.
I'm not here.
You see Siman. It says Siman Kiddush. It's the third line. Yeah. So what does it mean Siman? What does it mean Siman Chorash Chovash Zman? So he says that the Chorash is, you're going to see it's Amar Le'Rab Acha B'Rei Derava Le'Rab Ashi. Chovash is Rab Acha Saba Le'Rab Ashi, and Zman is Amar Le'Rab Marzucha B'Rei the Mori Le'Ravina. We're going to see this in a second what this means. Okay. It says this Amar Le'Rab Acha B'Rei Derava Le'Rab Ashi. So we had yesterday, we compared in the Chof Amid Aleph, we compared a person who sells a house, person who sells his house, and then, or a person who's Makdish Shteach Huzasi, his field. So we wanted to compare the two. So Amar Le'Rab Acha B'Rei Derava Le'Rab Ashi, he says, Ikli Mifrach, how could you compare the two? You can refute as follows. There's something very unique about a person who sells a house amongst the house of a walled cities. He now, the person who sells a house and is a walled city, he is now, his power is diminished. Why? Because he's not able to redeem it forever. Since he cannot redeem it after a year, he's basically stuck. Tamer ben Makdish, you're going to say that somebody who's Makdish, who now consecrates his field, as his power, he has now enhanced, that he's able to redeem it forever. So, in other words, you can't compare the two. Somebody who's Meicher Bayis, but after a year, he's finished. He can redeem it forever. Okay, so so Rashi says to Rab Saba, Rab Acha Saba says to Rab Ashi, the Meimer Neder Dina. The comparison is a good comparison. Why? Because you could say that the argument returns. Because you could say, you could learn it in a different manner as follows. Teisim matzah. You could derive it with an analogy of a common factor, matzah. And he says that the halacha of a person who sells a steach chuzah can prove that sheyipa koicheli gola ilam First of all, a person that has the power that's enhanced, he's able to redeem it, the field forever, and he cannot borrow money and redeem it. And he's not able to partially redeem it as well. So he says, Malam Meicher Steach Chuzah. What's unique about a person who sells a steach chuzah is that he's able to redeem it immediately. So the person who sells his house from amongst the houses of a walled city can prove otherwise. Now, even though a person can redeem the house immediately, he cannot borrow money and redeem it partially. So basically what's going to happen is it's going to go back and forth. Each aspect is not like the other aspect. Now, the common denominator is Shini Golin. In other words, the common denominator of Raviyah can be redeemed, and one can not borrow money and redeem them. And likewise, one personally cannot partially redeem them. I'm also going to bring the case of a person who's Makdish, his field, and the rule that this can be redeemed. And one cannot partially redeem it. Okay, now the third thing. You can refute this as follows. How could the common denominator is that the power is diminished and they're unable to redeem the property during the second year. In other words, a person sells a house, like we said in the year Chema, cannot redeem it beyond the year, while a person who sells a steach chuzah cannot redeem it in the first 2 years. And you say this with regards to a person who's makdish, his field, that his power is enhanced, and that he's able to redeem the field in the second year. You could say, Eved Ivri sold to a goy can prove otherwise. First of all, his power is enhanced; it's able to redeem himself in the second year. Nevertheless, he cannot borrow money and redeem himself, and he cannot partially redeem himself. Okay. Rav Huna Bar Chanina asked to shout to the Rashi. Oh, sorry. Boy made Rav Huna Bar Chanina made him sheshes. Rav Huna Bar Chanina raised the shayla before them sheshes. A person who sells a house from amongst the houses of a walled city. So, if a person who sells a house amongst the houses of a walled city, can he be redeemed by relatives or cannot be redeemed by relatives? In other words, is the ability to redeem a house limited to the seller himself or not? So he says it is. You can have two sides. Either we learn out gulasi from the steach chuzah. Just like a field cannot be partially redeemed and it cannot be redeemed by relatives. So that this house also cannot be partially redeemed and also but it could be redeemed by relatives. Or perhaps when it's written by the Geula, it's written with regards to relatives. It's written in regards to partial redemption. But it's not written in regards to relatives. If so, the Cheda doesn't apply to this halacha of redeeming by relatives. Amarleis and Shesh's answer, a person cannot be redeemed by relatives. A space, he asked the Shaila b'chol. It says in all your geula you shall give. Larabis b'botim ve'eved ivri, which comes to include a house and a eved ivri. My lab, but there is something. From here we see that this is referring to houses of a walled city, which is mashru that it can also be redeemed by kravim. So the Gemara answers and says, "Lei bati chasedim." It's referring to open areas without walls. So the Gemara asks, "Bati chasedim b'edik sibubu." The in regards to houses in an open area without walls, it says, "Klimated al steya or tzechosher," shall be listed with the field of the country, meaning that they are like steya chuzah. So there's no need for this halacha. So my answer it says Ahuva Kevachim, and there in that pasuk the serves to establish the redemption of the relatives as an obligation. This is according to Rabbi Lazar. The player says in regards to person who sells it says, and he shall redeem it that which his brother sold. Rishus. This is optional. In other words, if he wishes to do so, he can redeem the land. Maybe it's really a chevet. There says that, and if a man has no one to redeem, does a person have somebody who doesn't have redeemers? Every year there's a relative of some sort, even go trace a person's lineage, he has some sort of gael. Rather, the Torah is referring to a relative who does not want to purchase, to redeem the land. So, he has permission to refrain from doing so, since the Padiyah is a Rishus. These are the words of Rabbi Yeshua. Blazer says, the Torah says he shall redeem that which his brother has sold. This is a chayva. Maybe it's the Rishus. That's what the Torah says. In all your land you shall redeem. The Torah makes it obligatory. In other words, this is the interpretation according to Rabbi Lazar. Rabbanah tells Rav Ashi, Mela, according to the Mandar says that this comes to include the houses of a walled city. This is why it says in all. In all serves to a case, to omit a case of you shall grant B'diyah to all the land. But according to the one who says that includes houses in open areas of without a walls, what does it mean by Kel? Now, this is according to the opinion that holds that bottom in walled cities cannot be redeemed by relatives. So he says this. Why does it say me redeem 3 times? This comes to include all redemptions and that they are redeemed in this order. In other words, in the case of Eved sold by a goy, if he does not redeem himself, he can be redeemed by a brother. If he's not redeemed by a brother, he can be redeemed by an uncle or some other relatives. So, my love, but the Erichema. So, what is in the Cheda? It's referring to a case of a house of a walled cities and a Erichema of Eved. So, too, in the Cheda, they can be redeemed by relatives. So, Mar says, this is talking about houses in open areas and Steafuza. The Mar asks, clearly says that, clearly says that it could be redeemed. So, the Gemara says, so you don't need a special limud. You don't need a special limud? Correct. So, my answer to the Rav Nachman is, like Rav Nachman says, that the pasuk is detailing the Padiyah by relatives with regard to the Steafuza, that the closer of a relative, one is the seller, the earlier one is one is in the order of redeeming the Steafuza. In other words, the chiyuv to redeem the field applies first to the one who is closest relative to the seller. So to here, with regards to the houses of open areas, plus it is telling me, Nami, the cut of Kedem, is telling me that the closer of a relative is to the seller, the earlier one is in the order of being paid to the house. Where's the opinion of Rav Nachman Yitzchak stated? This is with regard to this issue. They raised the shaila before the Chacham. Eved Ivri sold to a Yid. Can a Eved Ivri sold to a Yid be redeemed by his relatives, or it cannot be redeemed by his relatives? So he says, "Aliba that Rebbe like to buy off the Shaila." According to Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, Rebbe that's not a Shaila. The Omar Mishan and Nikol Be'ela Nikol B'Sheish, because he says a person who's not redeemed by these relatives is redeemed by at least by 6 years of service. Alma Lei Mifrik. So we see that according to Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, everything result to a guy cannot be redeemed by his relatives. So Kiti Bailach, the Shaila is according to Aliba that Rabbanon Mai. According to the Chachamim, what's the halacha? Yafina Sacher Sacher V'Lei Dar Shigal. Now does he learn out hired worker and a hired worker? In the case of a yid sold to a guy, and say that just as one can be redeemed by relatives, if a person sold to a guy, sold to you, it can be redeemed if he sold to a yid, and therefore we're not going to interpret Yigaleno that order when we say he may redeem him. Perhaps the pasuk means may redeem him is in fact the restricting term, which is mashma that the halacha applies only to his slave. Only one sold to a guy can be redeemed by relatives, and it does not apply to another slave, one who sold to a yid. So I says Tashma, come bring a right from the Bryce before Gula to Tanano, says you shall grant redemption for all the land. The Rabbis bottom of this comes to include houses on the Hebrew slave. To redeem no. My lab bati orishem of Evedi because Yisrael must be referring to a case of houses of walled cities and a Evedi sold to a yid. Where it says like Evedi Ranim Kalanachi, this is talking about a Evedi sold to a guy. Mas Evedi Ranim Kalanachi Edixiv Oide Ben Deidiglana. There is clearly that either his uncle or his uncle's son may redeem him. It's not necessary to use the salimut. So the Gemara answers, it says no. This is referring to establish the redemption, to redeeming him as an obligation. I feel that to be sure, this is according to be sure, it says that there's no requirement to redeem land. In this case, it's different, as it's proper to redeem him to prevent it from being basically assimilated by the goyim. Tashma coming here, Raya from Abraisa. Matam Lemer Yiglan Sholish Pam. Why does the Torah say redeem 3 times? The Rabbi is called Gulish, and he goes Kaseder Azeh. This comes to include the Gula, and they're redeemed in this order. My love, but the Arisham of Eved Kidushin must be talking about a case of referring to houses of walled cities and the Eved resold to that they can be redeemed by relatives. When it says no, but the Chasin with the Achuzah, this is talking about Bate Chasin with the Achuzah. So when it says again, Bate Chasin by Adiksibu, they are Tichoshim. Or not right. So the Karav Kingdom is telling me that the closer the relative one is to the seller, the earlier one in the order of redeeming the house of the field. Okay. Now the Gemara returns to the Mishnah, which says, it says, an Eved Ivri who was pierced after serving for 6 years is acquired as a slave for a long period through either piercing his ear with this tool. The pasuk says clearly, and his master shall pierce his ear with this martzea with a all. It's very interesting. The Mefarshim say martzea is begatria. I believe it's like 410, right? Martzea. So you say, what's the after we use martzea? Because this person that, right? So he heard the Mitzrayim that kili avodaim, and what does he do? He goes and he sells himself to become an Eved. Okay, and he has acquired himself either through Yovel Misadan, Ksiva Avodei, as it says, and he shall serve him forever. Okay, so what does it mean? Now, the Gemara explains that it's what does it mean? He shall serve forever. This means that he serves only his master and not the son and not the daughter. Which means forever, which means Vayevel. In other words, forever doesn't mean forever, but refers to the end of the Yovel cycle. Says on Martzea, from here I learned that he pierces the ear of the Martzea. For what do I know that you can use a sharp thorn or the different type of thorn or a needle or this auger and like a stylus to make the hole. Then so it says Villa Kafta, and you shall take it. The Rabbi is called Davar Shnikach Biyadei. This comes to include any implement that can be taken in the master's hand. These are the words of Rabbi Biyadei. Rabbi says, "Ma martzeam yuchad shel mateches." He says, no, all utensils cannot be used. Just like a martzeh is unique in that it's made of metal. Of course, it has to be made of metal. This comes to include the large martzeh for piercing. Rabbi Elazar says, Yudin b'nebi hayudeirish. Yudin, which means that the distinguished one, would teach as follows. When they pierced only with on the earlobe. Now, the piercing is not performed on the earlobe because the halach is that a Eved Ivri who is a kohen is not pierced because the piercing will make him a mum and he's not fit to serve the Beis Hamikdash. If you're going to say that they pierce the slave's earlobe, so l'cheda hey Eved Ivri kohen yasab mum. So how does Eved Ivri who's a kohen become a balmum? Cheda pierced earlobe is not considered balmum, and yitzal begivish le'ezen, which means that he's pierced only in the upper part of the ear through the cartilage. If the Gemara says, what does Rabbi Yehuda, what is Rabbi and Rabbi Yossi arguing in?
I mean, he's not allowed to make that. No, come on.
Yeah, you can't.
So he doesn't serve. I want to know, you're not allowed to make somebody a move.
Yeah. So he says, Dorshu, the Rebbe Dorish Poli Prati. Rabbi Yehuda knows he expounds Dorish Klal Prat. Vilokach as a klal. Martzi is a prat. Bosna with us Chazru Klal. So now I have a klal of Prat klal. You have to do look in that prat. Ma prat mefurish shalom atach. Especially if the prat is metal. Afkoil shem atach. So too has to be metal. Beisi Darshi Ribuya Moti. He says no. It's a Ribuya Miyat. Vilokach is a Ribuya. Martzi is a Miyat. Bosna with us is Chazru Ribuya. Ribuya Miyat. Ribuya Nibako. My Rabbi. What? So she says my Rabbi. What does he include? Rabbi Komili. He includes everything that can be pierced in the ear. My mate, what is the restricted miyat sam is coming to in other words, producing a hole in the slave's ear with the type of substance of this type of kind of how do you say it in English, a poison. It's in other words, an acid. Exactly, the burn. That's not good. Now, Amar Mar, he says hamartzea. When he says hamartzea, this comes to include the large martzea. My mashma. How's the mashma? Ha yarich. He says with regards to the pasuk says the thigh. Hamiyumenes shebirech. This is the most important part of the thigh. Achanami is when we said ha martzeh. Though, what does it mean? The martzeh. Hamiyuchash martzeh. The special tool. Amar Belazer Yudin Berebi Ayidesh. He says that the distinguished Rebbe with the Yudin Sheberebi with Deish Shein Reitzin Ein Reitzin Ela B'Milso. When they would pierce the ear, they pierce it only on the earlobe. He doesn't do this because it will become blemished. So for the Gemara asks what you said. What's the big deal? Let him be blemished. Why is this also to make a kain of almum? Oh, so he says it says that he shall return to his own family. The musaf means his status, his family. In other words, he has to be able to return to the position. He has to be able to return to the position as a member of the family. So once you pierce him, he's not going to be able to b'shalom mishmachta. He's not going to be able to return like a normal person. Can I ask this? In regards to Eved Ivri who's a kain, what's the halacha? Is it permissible for the master to provide him with a Eved Kananis, with a Kanani to have relations? Now, what's the question? Chiddush, do I say that it's Chiddush, as a Yid generally is also from engaging in relations with a Goy, and Leishna Kain, Leishna Yisrael, there's no difference between a Kain and Yisrael. I don't understand it. Shana Kainim, Hevid ben Akasim, it's said that they gave more mitzvahs to a Kain. Therefore, the Isser for a Kain to engage in relations with the Kanani Isser, it will be Isser, even though she's also she's permitted to non-Kain. Rabbi, what does Shmuel Amar also? So he says, when you were studying in the house of Shmuel, did you play with the Rashi says tokens? Did you play with cards? He said, what do you mean? You didn't take your learning seriously. My time, what's the reason that you don't? What's the reason that you do not need a proof to him from that which we learned? Chomrim and the Chom say in Eved Ivri kain it's from nation asim amum. Eved Ivri who's a kain is not pierced at all because piercing makes him a blemish. Right. Now, and if you're going to say that if you're going to say that the master cannot provide him an Eved Zani, it's he says so you can learn from here. The Torah says, "I love my master, my wife, and my children," and it cannot be issued by a kain if his master cannot provide him with a Eved Kanani. And nothing can be answered to this proof. In other words, the reason given by the Chachamim proves that the Kanani, the Shivcha Kananis can be provided to a kain. Because then he won't be. Otherwise, then he'll have an issue with the Haftis that they see to his bunny. Hey, boy, that's the Shaila. A kain will be fast there. Can a kain? What's halacha for a kain who goes to war? Can he have relations with the Torah? Says it can be. He can have a fast there, right? So can a kain have a fast there? Now, do I say chiddush relation to kain relation? So do I say it's a chiddush? The Torah permits a man to have it to go. So the Mashani Kain, everybody but Ben is mitzvah. Now Kain is usher because he has other mitzvahs. So then Rav Amar Mutter or Shmuel were usher. Now the Gemara says, with regard to the first act of actual bia between the soldier and the goyish woman, everybody agrees that it's permitted. Like the they're speaking about the Yitzhar, and the Yitzhar of a Kain is as strong as a regular Yid. So what are they talking about? Keep thinking of Bia Shnia. They're talking about a Bia Shnia. Since it's permitted, also. And with a Geras, why? Because the fast is a Geras. And Geras, the Kain Lechazi. Why is the Geras the Kain Lechazi? Because a Kain can't marry a Zayna. And the Geras is a Zayna. Cheska Chazaka, she's a Zayna. Ikidam, other people say Azay. Bia Shnia, Kulamale Pigidasi, everybody agrees that Bia Shnia, you can't. Have the Geras. Keep thinking Kidushin. Now, Mutter, Allah, Gibatel, Gesar, Shulamar, also, Kalech, the Kanin Beva, Vesel, take Besaka, in the Beva, very some Shivia, Kalech, the Kanin Beva, they will Saka, the Kanin Bashivia. According to this opinion. Now, he says why? Because, let me just explain that. Shmuel says it's usher. Why? Because you say, when the Pasuk says that you bring her to their home, you see, you could also fulfill and see amongst the captives a beautiful woman. Now, any situation that one cannot read the Pasuk, then you shall bring her home to your house. In other words, if the soldier will not marry her, then you don't read the pasuk. The next part and then one can have relations with her. Okay, we'll stop here.